One outlaw torched a pristine canyon and wiped out 49 endangered condors. Another crooner motored 8 backroad miles on a rusty lawnmower just to grab a bottle, and an adored singer vanished behind a tail so thin a stiff breeze could tear it apart. Country music's golden age sounds wholesome from a distance, but lean in and the static crackles with crimes, cover-ups, and whispered vengeance. Tonight, every rumor, every backstage feud, every headline the Nashville gatekeepers tried to bury rises again, loud as a steel guitar solo that refuses to fade. The blaze starts in California, 1965. Johnny Cash sets up camp near Los Padres National Forest, guzzling pills and cheap coffee to keep his eyes popping between tour dates. A drunken lantern tips, flames race through tinder-dry brush, and hours later a hillside looks like the moon. 49 condors, each with a wingspan wider than Cash's tour bus, drop from the smoky sky. Rangers scream, reporters swarm, biologists beg for an apology. Cash snarls that he does what he pleases and keeps barking until the courthouse doors finally close behind him. 200 miles east and a dozen years later, Tammy Wynette rings her hairdresser at dawn, voice trembling that masked strangers shoved her into a phantom Cadillac. She reappears days later bruised and shaken, says she escaped by leaping from the moving car. Police scratch their heads, journalists chew their pens, and friends mumble that the story smells wrong. Insiders insist the kidnapping was smoke to cover fresh welts, courtesy of an abusive husband, or to hide rising dependence on pain meds. Official files stay thin, leaving fans to choose whichever nightmare fits the melody of "Stand By Your Man." Hank Williams never witnessed the mystery swirling around his own blue-veined body. New Year's Day, 1953. He slumps dead in the back seat while his driver barrels toward Canton, Ohio. Officials blame booze and pills, yet witnesses whisper about angry promoters roughing him up before departure, and bruises blooming under the morgue lights feed talk that someone crushed the hillbilly Shakespeare's ribs for unpaid debts. Whatever truth died on that frozen roadside, the radio kept spinning, "Your cheatin' heart," and the public never heard his last gasp. Before Patsy Cline boarded that doomed Piper Comanche, she confessed over coffee that she would never reach 30. Friends brushed it off as nerves, but the words clung like static. Days later, the plane buckled into a Tennessee forest, and her forecast became gospel. Stagehands swear the dressing room bulb by her portrait still flickers whenever a newcomer hums, "Crazy," a ghostly tap on the shoulder reminding hopefuls how little time a dream can last. Jim Reeves heard storm warnings over the cockpit radio in 1964 and ignored them, banking his tiny aircraft into rolling charcoal clouds. Lightning split the sky like a camera flash, and the fuselage shattered the trees moments later. Investigators called it pilot error. Old-school DJs whispered Reeves believed his nickname, Gentleman Jim, meant rules bent for him. Either way, his velvet baritone froze mid-note forever. Legend claims George Jones once roared awake to discover his car keys hidden by furious wife Tammy. Undeterred, he climbed onto a riding mower and bounced 8 miles down a Tennessee highway to score whiskey. Passing drivers stared while the possum-faced singer waved like a parade marshal. Later, Jones joked the mower steered straighter than he ever could after 2 bottles, cementing his outlaw lore more firmly than any platinum record. Merle Haggard witnessed redemption form on the cold stone walls of San Quentin. As an inmate, he watched Johnny Cash stomp and howl on the prison stage, every chord rattling steel bars. Haggard swore then to trade robbery for rhyme. Once free, he sculpted songs about ex-convicts trying to stay straight. Yet he never erased inmate number A45200 from his memory. It followed him like a prisoner's shadow even when presidents hailed him a patriot. Patsy Montana bustled across radio studios in the 30s while secretly pregnant, a sin punishable by career evaporation. Promoters hushed the delivery, placed the baby with distant relatives, and staged photo shoots that hid every curve. She yodeled about prairie freedom while fearing one slip would reveal her forbidden bond. Decades passed before the truth surfaced. by which time fans seemed stunned only that America's first million-selling cowgirl had dared desire anything private. Loretta Lynn met Dew at 13, married him at 15, and spent decades turning his cheating escapades into chart toppers. She belted lyrics describing lipstick on collars and slammed doors, transforming marital chaos into feminist fire before the term landed in Nashville. Audiences two-stepped while their grandmothers whispered Loretta's honesty cut deeper than any rhinestone. Backstage, Dolly Parton shimmered under Porter Wagoner's rhinestone glare. He boosted her early career but soon bristled each time her spotlight grew brighter. Contracts tightened like barbed wire, so Dolly slipped out by writing "I Will Always Love You," a farewell wrapped in honey but laced with legal teeth. When Elvis tried to buy the song, she refused, proving she had learned to steer her own glittery empire. Charlie Rich stood on the 1975 CMA stage, read John Denver's name as Entertainer of the Year, then flicked his lighter and torched the envelope, mumbling country was going soft. Millions watched flames curl paper while network censors panicked. The Silver Fox walked off smirking, forever splitting the genre between purists and crossover dreamers. Hank Snow strutted across stages in immaculate suits. Off stage, his son later alleged the superstar delivered beatings so fierce windows rattled. The public heard only perfect yodels, never screams echoing behind locked doors. Snow denied everything until his final breath, but the stain darkened his rhinestones. Conway Twitty smoldered on album covers with open shirts and half-lidded eyes. Rumors spun about affairs with far younger admirers, whisked through backstage exits. Though unproven, the gossip clung like the cologne that followed him down dim corridors. Under Minnie Pearl's price tag hat hid night terrors and anxiety that clawed her throat before every gag. Crowds howled. Afterward, she sat alone, pulse racing, lipstick trembling against a paper cup. She learned to turn shaking knees into comedy gold, masking the panic that never truly left. Producer Billy Sherrill draped violins across barroom ballads, then allegedly greased palms to guarantee radio rotation. DJs who played along scored vacations. Skeptics found their promos mysteriously missing. Charts climbed, royalties soared, and country's velvet revolution marched on while independent voices stayed outside the velvet rope. David Allan Coe hustled outlaw bravado under neon but moonlighted pressing underground discs stuffed with slurs so vile they scorched turntables. Sent through secret mail order lists, the recordings detonated reputations whenever unearthed. Coe shrugged, insisting freedom of expression, but mainstream stations slammed the door, leaving him wandering honky-tonks armed with only cult infamy. The Grand Ole Opry owned a blacklist thicker than a Baptist hymnal. Show up late, gripe at a sponsor, or forget whose handshake mattered, and your name vanished. Careers froze overnight, and even loyal fans found ticket windows shuttered. Whisper networks taught rookies to bow low and keep watches synced to the minute. When Elvis Presley swaggered onto the Opry stage in 1954, a manager told him to stick to trucking. He boarded the Midnight Greyhound nursing hurt pride, electrified Louisiana hayride weeks later, and never looked back. The Opry's rejection stands as country's biggest miscalculation, proof a gatekeeper's crystal ball can fog. Nashville's unspoken rulebook hammered women hardest. Stars were told to smile, hush complaints, and accept lopsided contracts or risk exile. Quiet hotel room gatherings became covert workshops where they compared royalty statements, swapped lawyer numbers, and sowed seeds for future revolutions. Marty Robbins painted cowboy ballads by day, then crept into stock cars at night, hurtling 300 laps beneath scorching floodlights. One crash could have erased his catalog, yet the roar of engines lured him back until heart trouble finally benched the daredevil for good. Farron Young spent decades lacing barroom anthems with jokes about heartbreak, but after modern radio shoved him aside, he reached for a revolver and offed himself. Friends found him alive but fading, his house echoing with songs he would never finish. Posthumous tributes rolled non-stop. A cruel reminder devotion often arrives too late. Johnny Cash later stood at a wildlife fundraiser and addressed the condor disaster obliquely, saying only, "I've made peace with the birds." Conservationists split. Some forgave. Others argued no apology could replace wings. Yet Ticket Proceeds funded new breeding programs, stitching a thin thread of redemption through ash. Take Porter Wagoner and Dolly Parton. TV audiences saw spangled duets and teasing smiles. Behind dressing room doors, tension tightened like a banjo string. Porter allegedly dictated wardrobes and set lists, and when Dolly edged toward solo stardom, his temper uncoiled, smashing a table mirror. She filed the memory, banked the royalties, and plastered her grin across billboards while Porter's ratings sagged. Not every scandal involved flames or bribery. Some bled into family albums. Hank Snow's son described being whipped with electrical cords and locked in closets until dawn. Snow dismissed the accusations as delusions, but listeners couldn't unhear the echoes once the story broke. Conway Twitty kept projecting sensual confidence, collars popped open just enough to hint at late-night promises. One unverified tale claims a distraught father pounded on a tour bus door demanding his runaway daughter. Security hushed the chaos, police files evaporated, and "Hello, Darlin'" climbed even higher. Mental turmoil didn't bypass comedy. Minnie Pearl spent decades yelling "howdy," yet no audience sensed the tremors raging under her corseted costume. She prayed backstage, dabbed sweat from trembling palms, and marched toward spotlights that felt hotter than hellfire. Tammy Wynette's mystery inspired fresh theories each anniversary. Some investigators revisited prescription slips showing painkiller dosages skyrocketing before her vanishing act, claiming she needed a story to mask withdrawal sweats. Others fixated on driveway skid marks that matched no known abductor. The official file still yawns with unanswered blanks. Hank Williams' last ride birthed endless speculation. One rumor says a disgruntled physician injected him with morphine to quiet tremors, not realizing booze already flooded his veins. Another claims small-town hustlers forced him to perform through bruising beatings. With archives sealed, folklore thrives. Patsy Montana's concealed child grew up hearing her mother on crackly AM radios, without knowing the voice belonged to the woman who mailed her birthday card signed Auntie. Years later, the revelation prompted fan debates about whether fame ever excuses deception, but the daughter simply said survival sometimes demands silence. Loretta Lynn's The Pill rattled conservative airwaves, yet rural mothers slipped battered vinyl copies friend to friend. The controversy buried another sharp message hiding in plain sight. A coal miner's daughter telling brides to demand respect long before activists coined slogans. Billy Sherrill's Velvet Strings soon dominated playlists, but purists grumbled violins drowned the grit. Touring old-timer musicians hustling tips on Lower Broadway felt abandoned, strumming raw honky-tonk to tourists hunting authenticity. David Allan Coe's plain brown mailers allegedly left his mother's garage stuffed with lyrics too toxic for daylight. Courthouses threatened obscenity fines, but Coe played coy, knowing outrage sold tickets. Marty Robbins finally retired from racing when doctors warned one more wreck could split him beyond repair. He joked on stage he'd always loved horsepower and heartache, yet his final liner notes thanked guardian angels for letting him finish shows standing. Farron Young's tragedy sparked outreach programs for aging musicians, though insiders whisper those brochures often arrive after midnight despair has done its worst. So the next time a steel guitar sighs about heartbreak, remember scorched forests, bruised ribs, crooked contracts, whispered payoffs, and ghosts that still wander backstage. Country's glory was forged in fragile human flaws. Knowing the grime makes the glitter gleam brighter because every scar, rumor, and hushed confession echoes through the twang. That's why the old songs never die. They're powered by secrets too wild to stay quiet. The shadows do not end where the spotlights fade, because every whistle-stop town collected its own legends whenever the tour buses hissed to a halt. County sheriffs still recall sleepless nights escorting convoys of singers who could outsing angels and outdrink pirates, stashing rye under bunk pillows and sugar-coating pills so they looked like breath mints. Diners along Route 66 kept coffee pots simmering for headliners whose pupils danced like strobe lights, the gloss of cola-colored cough syrup still staining chipped mugs decades later. One waitress saved a crinkled candy wrapper that fell from a star's pocket. She framed it over the register, proof a chart legend once ordered scrambled eggs in her booth before dawn. Meanwhile, the industry spin machine polished every disaster into folklore bright enough to sparkle beneath radio reverb. Publicists faxed catchy lines to gossip pages, converting bar brawls into rowdy authenticity and court summonses into growing pains. A broken jaw from an after-party scuffle became evidence an outlaw never backed down, while hospital charts morphed into tales of doctor-ordered rest between marathon sessions. Rural stations repeated the slogans verbatim, eager for exclusive interviews, and listeners felt closer to idols who seemed untouchable, yet somehow just like the neighbor who crashed a tractor into a fence on Saturday night. Women who pushed back against that marketing pipeline discovered Nashville hospitality hid barbs sharper than cactus spines. One vocalist merely requested royalties equal to her duet partner and found her tour bus repossessed overnight. Another asked for maternity leave. 3 days later, her label consolidated resources and reassigned her studio time to a teenage crooner with a brighter smile. A third arrived at rehearsal to learn her keycard no longer opened the door. Each setback birthed whispered support circles in hotel lounges where artists shared lawyer numbers and plotted quiet revolts that would bloom decades later into headline-grabbing reckonings. Payola never vanished. It simply changed disguises when the 80s painted neon across Music Row. Program directors swapped brown envelopes for country club memberships, luxury hotel weekends, and private skyboxes at championship games, all billed through shell companies hidden 3 subsidiaries deep. If a single wobbled on the charts, promoters bundled it with a hotter act and labeled the track value-added content to ensure airtime. A handful of disc jockeys resigned in protest, but most shrugged, spun the record, and cashed steady paychecks. Years later, investigators subpoenaed ledgers, but accountants buried the truth beneath enough paperwork to dull any verdict. Outlaw glamour carried a price few rookies understood until the spotlight cooled. The same magazines that praised hard-living authenticity began tallying hospital bracelets like baseball stats, listing overdoses beside gold record totals. Private grief turned into clickbait, funeral photographs leaked, widows met camera flashes before the first hymn ended. A veteran tour manager summed it up while loading the final amp of his career. "We spent 40 years selling danger as entertainment, but the invoice sometimes arrived in coffins." Yet the music survived because flaws make melodies unforgettable. Digital remasters scrubbed away hiss, but engineers could not erase the ghosts hiding in the grooves. Lean in and you might hear a beer bottle clink against a steel string at the tail of a forgotten take, or catch a singer muttering a joke the producer vowed to splice out. Those sonic fingerprints remind listeners the legends were flesh and frets, not marble statues. Every hiss is a heartbeat, every unintended cough a confession, every rumor a rebel chord ringing long after the band has left the building. When the new millennium arrived, a fresh generation dug through thrift shop vinyl bins hunting the raw cuts corporate playlists ignored, and the web turned rumor chasing into a participatory blood sport. Message board detectives compared press clippings with archived dockets, posted grainy mugshots beside chart positions, and mapped tour itineraries against unsolved police reports. Some discoveries vindicated forgotten whistleblowers. Others birthed wilder theories, but every revelation proved fans still crave messy humanity behind rhinestones. The cycle spins on. A young singer records a demo on her phone, signs a contract before graduation, and steps onto carpets lined with holographic billboards of the same icons whose ghosts keep pacing backstage. She vows never to repeat their mistakes. Maybe she won't. Yet somewhere a bus is idling. A guitar tech is stacking crates of energy drinks beside crates of bourbon. and an old roadie is muttering that history rhymes louder than any chorus. Every era believes it finally tames temptation. Every era eventually learns that country music keeps breaking hearts, including those creating it. In the end, dark stories survive because listeners crave truth wrapped in twang, and no amount of polish can smother that primal buzz forever. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.